Imagine walking into work and instead of just a normal day, you're suddenly handed a letter. And it basically says, you're dismissed, effective immediately.
Yeah, no notice, no chance to wrap things up, no payout. It's that real gut punch moment.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. Summary dismissal. It's the most extreme step an employer can take, right?
Yeah.
Reserved for when they claim your conduct was just so bad.
So profoundly bad, it breaks the contract instantly. And that severity, the sheer shock of it, is why this deep dive is so important for employees in Australia.
Right?
We're looking at insights from specialists, people who handle hundreds of these cases, and the sources are really clear. For a summary dismissal to stick legally, it needs two things. Absolutely needs them.
Okay, what are they?
First, the justification. Did serious misconduct actually happen? And second, and this is often the decider, did the employer follow procedural fairness?
Okay, let's unpack this then. We want to give you, the listener, a clear picture of your rights if you're ever faced with this kind of instant termination.
Yeah, because we're talking about something the employer claims is so disruptive, so damaging, the relationship just can't go on for even one more minute.
So where does the law, like the Fair Work Act, actually draw that line? What makes a mistake bad enough for instant firing?
Well, the Fair Work Act 2009 is very specific. Summary dismissal is considered fair and reasonable only if the employee engaged in serious misconduct.
And that's not just, like, poor performance or being late a couple of times.
No, definitely not. It's not about forgetting a deadline or needing more training. The legal test is whether the actions were so severe, so totally against your duties, that it genuinely makes it impractical for the contract to continue.
I think that's a really key distinction for people listening. It's easy to assume any stuff up could lead to being fired on the spot. But you're saying it has to hit a specific level of seriousness? What does that look like according to the precedents?
Absolutely. It centers on the impact. Are we talking about actions that create a serious, immediate risk to someone's health or safety? Or is it a major, immediate threat to the business itself? You know, its reputation, its finances, its security. The sources point to key categories the Fair Work Commission looks at.
Right. Can you lay those out for us? What are the sort of textbook examples?
Yeah, the clearest ones usually involve integrity and safety. So think theft, stealing stuff, data, even faking timesheets, that kind of fraudulent activity.
Makes sense.
Then there's violence and harassment. Physical assault, obviously, but also serious bullying or sexual harassment.
Right.
And third, safety breaches, like being impaired at work because you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, especially if you're, say, operating machinery or responsible for others.
Yeah, those all sound like immediate deal breakers. But you mentioned a fourth one earlier, refusing to follow a fair and reasonable directive. That sounds a bit, well, potentially tricky.
It can be. That's where the nuance really kicks in. And look, a single refusal, especially if the instruction wasn't totally clear or maybe even safe, that usually wouldn't cut it for summary dismissal.
Yeah.
But a repeated, deliberate refusal, a clear pattern of ignoring reasonable instructions that really undermines the manager's ability to, well, manage, that can cross the line into serious misconduct.
The sources also bring up something really interesting here. The difference between someone just saying something happened and proving it. It's not enough for the boss to just think you stole something.
Not at all. The burden of proof is entirely on the employer. They can't just allege it. They have to actually prove it happened on the balance of probability.
And it's a probability, so more likely than not.
Exactly. And it's fascinating how often specialists see this play out. Sometimes the evidence is solid, dismissal justified, but other times the accusation is just made up or the employer has blown a minor issue way out of proportion. And there's another layer of complexity too. Sometimes an employer tries for summary dismissal over one incident, when really the issue is a pattern of smaller things over time. They need to use the right legal justification for the right kind of problem.
That difference between one big serious act and a documented pattern of smaller issues is definitely something crucial for listeners to grasp.
Yeah. And if we step outside the actual workplace for a minute, we need to talk about the thing that causes so much confusion now: private life.
Ah, yes. The assumption is usually what I do on my own time is my business. Can conduct outside of work hours really lead to a lawful summary dismissal here in Australia?
That's the million-dollar question in the social media age, isn't it? If I post something silly on my private Facebook page on holiday, can my boss fire me for it instantly?
Where does the law draw that line?
Okay, so the general rule is no. Your employer usually can't interfere with your private life. The law protects that autonomy. However,
There's always a however.
there is. Dismissal can be upheld, but only if the out-of-hours behavior meets very specific, strict conditions showing a direct link back to the employment.
Okay, and what are those links? What connects private behavior to the job strongly enough?
There are basically 3 key tests. First, the conduct has to have a proven damaging effect on the professional relationship, either with the employer directly or maybe with colleagues. Say you're constantly attacking management publicly online.
Right, so it impacts the workplace dynamic.
Second, the conduct has to genuinely undermine the employer's legitimate interests. Often, this means harming their public reputation significantly. Like, if you work for an environmental group and get caught illegally dumping hazardous waste, that connection is pretty clear.
So again, it's not just that the boss doesn't like what you did. They need to show real damage or risk. What's the third link?
The third is if the conduct is fundamentally contrary to the employee's specific job duties. This often comes up for roles with high levels of trust teachers, police officers, aged care workers.
Oh,
So if a teacher is dismissed for private conduct, the employer has to prove that conduct makes them unfit to actually do their job, like ensuring child safety. If they can't clearly establish one of those 3 links, the dismissal based on private activity will almost certainly fail.
okay, this is crucial stuff. Now, let's pivot to what you said is often the absolute core protection for employees here. We've talked about the misconduct. Now, the process. Let's talk procedural fairness.
Yes.
Why is this so often the make or break factor in unfair dismissal claims, sometimes even more than whether the person actually did the thing?
This is where it gets really interesting, and honestly, it's the part employers mess up most often. Procedural fairness is a fundamental right, and the sources show failure to follow the proper process. That can be fatal to the employer's case.
Even if the employee was caught red-handed.
Even then, imagine CCTV footage clearly shows an employee stealing. But if the manager just sacks them on the spot 5 minutes later without going through the required steps, that dismissal can still be ruled legally unfair by the commission.
Wow. That probably seems counterintuitive to a lot of people listening. Why put process above clear guilt? If I'm caught stealing, why do I get a fair process?
It's a great question. The law mandates fairness, not necessarily to excuse the misconduct itself, but to protect the individual's basic right to be heard, and crucially, to prevent managers from acting rashly or unfairly.
Oh, okay.
The process forces a pause. It ensures decisions aren't just based on anger or bias. It gives the employee a chance to explain, maybe offer mitigating factors if the employer shortcuts that. They basically forfeit their right to rely solely on the misconduct.
Okay, so for a listener then, what's the checklist? What steps must an employer take under the Fair Work Act to ensure they've met procedural fairness?
It's a pretty strict list designed to be fair at each stage. First, the employer has to follow their own internal policies for dealing with serious misconduct. If they have them, they can't just make it up as they go.
Right. Use their own rule book.
Second, they have to properly investigate the situation, gather the facts. Not just the facts that point towards guilt, but all relevant information.
Okay, investigation, following policies. What about the employee side? Their right to know and respond.
Absolutely critical. They must give the employee a clear, specific explanation of exactly what they're accused of. Not vague stuff. Your attitude is bad. It has to be, on Tuesday at 3 p.m. you allegedly did X.
Specific matter.
Immensely. And then the employer has to give the employee a fair and reasonable amount of time to actually respond to those allegations. It has to be a genuine chance to reply, not just tell me now or you're fired.
And once the employee gives their side of the story, the employer can't just file it away.
Correct. They have a legal duty to fully consider that response. Any defense, any explanation, any mitigating factors, they have to weigh it up before making the final call on dismissal.
Okay. And what about support during meetings?
Huge one. During any meeting about the allegations, the investigation, the disciplinary meeting, the employer must offer the employee the option to have a support person present. Could be a colleague, a union rep, a friend, an advisor.
And how often does failing on that point alone sink an employer's case?
Very often. It's a fundamental protection. Having a support person there helps ensure accuracy, prevents intimidation, helps the employee who's likely under immense stress. If an employer denies that right, it's a major breach of procedural fairness, and the unfair dismissal claim gets much, much stronger regardless of the original misconduct.
Okay. And the final step.
Once the decision to dismiss is made, they have to provide written notice of that dismissal on the same day. No delays.
Wow, that is a comprehensive set of protections.
Yeah.
So it's really clear if someone listening was summarily dismissed and their employer failed on even one of those points, didn't investigate properly, refused a support person, didn't give time to respond, they likely have strong grounds for an unfair dismissal claim.
That's the essential takeaway, yes. These rights aren't optional extras, they're legally required. Failure to follow the process is failure to follow the law.
Okay, connecting this to actually doing something about it, we have to talk about the thing that catches so many people out. Time. You could have a watertight case, but if you wait too long.
You lose your chance, yes. The clock is incredibly strict, and frankly, it's the biggest trap for someone reeling from a summary dismissal shock.
So how strict are we talking?
The absolute deadline to lodge an unfair dismissal application with the Fair Work Commission, the FWC, is just 21 calendar days from the date the dismissal took effect.
21 days. That's barely any time at all, especially when you're probably still processing the shock, trying to figure out what happened, maybe looking for advice. What if you miss it by 1 day?
It's incredibly difficult to get an extension. The FWC is very tough on this. You'd need truly exceptional circumstances, like being in hospital and physically unable to lodge it, and those are rare. If you're dismissed, that 21-day clock needs to be your absolute top priority.
Okay, message received. Act fast. Now, beyond that brutal time limit, who's actually eligible to make a claim? Can anyone?
Not quite. There are 3 main hurdles to clear for eligibility. First is tenure, how long you worked there. Generally, you need at least 6 months of continuous service.
That's months. Okay.
That period goes up to 12 months if you work for a small business. And a small business is defined as having fewer than 15 employees.
Fewer than 15, right. So short-term employees or those in very small businesses might not be covered. What are the other 2 requirements?
The second is about your earnings.
Yeah.
Your annual rate of earnings has to be below the high income threshold. Currently, that threshold is $183,100.
Okay.
Unless your job is covered by a modern award or an enterprise agreement. If you're covered by one of those, the income threshold doesn't apply. Figuring that out can sometimes be complex itself.
So tenure and income. What's the third? Oh, wait, was that it? Tenure and income threshold or award coverage?
Essentially, yes. Those are the big 2 hurdles after establishing you were actually dismissed. Tenure and then the income award question.
Right. Okay, so considering the 21-day deadline, the need to gather evidence, figuring out the legal points like serious misconduct versus procedural fairness. This whole thing sounds incredibly daunting for someone who's just lost their job.
It absolutely is. It's complex, it's stressful, and employers usually have HR departments or lawyers ready to defend their decision. Navigating the FWC process requires understanding their rules, how to present evidence, negotiation tactics.
Yeah.
Which is why the source material really stresses getting help quickly. There are specialist workplace relations advisors, like the ones whose insights we're drawing on, who focus only on representing employees.
And they often work on a no-win, no-fee basis.
Many do, yes. Yeah. Which is crucial because it means someone who's just lost their income doesn't need to find thousands for upfront legal fees just to start fighting for fair treatment.
Okay, so let's quickly recap the main points from this deep dive. Summary dismissal. It's the employer's nuclear option, only meant for proven serious misconduct.
Correct.
But crucially, the whole thing can fall apart if the employer doesn't meticulously follow procedural fairness. That checklist, proper investigation, clear allegations, real chance to respond, offering a support person that's non-negotiable.
Absolutely non-negotiable. It's the bedrock of the employee's rights in this situation.
And if you are dismissed like this, you have less than 3 weeks, just 21 days to lodge a claim with the Fair Work Commission. The clock is ticking loudly.
Exactly. And perhaps a final thought to leave listeners with, really digging into why that procedural fairness matters so much.
Go on.
Why does the law insist on these steps even when, like you said, guilt might seem obvious? It's because procedural fairness fundamentally challenges the idea that management has absolute unquestionable power. It forces the employer, the decision maker, to slow down, to listen, to justify their actions against a fair standard. It protects the employee's basic human right to be heard before such a drastic action is taken. It's a powerful check against impulsive, biased, or just plain unfair decisions.
That really reframes it. Justice isn't just about what happened, but about whether your fundamental rights were respected while it was being dealt with.
Precisely.
So for everyone listening, whether you're navigating this yourself or just want to understand your workplace rights, better take a look at your own company policies. Understand that procedural checklist, and never forget those tight time limits. That knowledge really is your best protection.